Hi, I'm Jack Baruzzini, and you're listening to The Secret to Stargate, where we talk about the hidden meanings and deeper layers found in the Stargate movies, TV series, and more. And joining me today are Jeff Haecker. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, Jack.
And Lisa Jones. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Jack.
And Victor Lambs. Hey, Victor.
Hi, Jack.
Today we are discussing the 10th and 11th episodes of Season 9 of Stargate SG-1, The Four Horsemen, Parts 1 and 2. Following the Ori's takeover of planet P2X885, Carter and Dr. Lee begin developing a weapon to counteract the prior abilities, while in Dakara, the Jaffa leader Garrick is swayed by a prior to embrace Origin. He's really not making the Jaffa look good here with following false gods very easily, causing division in the Jaffa High Council despite the opposition from Teal'c and Braytak. Meanwhile, a devastating prior plague spreads rapidly across Earth after being introduced by Lieutenant Fisher, leading to a national quarantine. It's a very science fiction element that we've never seen before.
Nope.
Orlin returns, yay. This time he is a little boy, and reveals that the Ori's true nature, that they drain the life force from their followers rather than actually granting ascension. Mitchell and Jackson lead a mission to the newly completed anti-prior device, captured the specific prior on the Sodan planet. Garrick falters in his mission to convert Chulak and is subsequently transformed into a powerful prior by the Ori. Garrick tries to convince the Jaffa High Council to follow the Ori as a prior now. Teal'c plans to fight against him on Chulak. Cameron Mitchell and his team prepare to stop the prior on the Sodan's homeworld. Lord Hykon reveals that he and the rest of the Sodan have renounced Origin and are going to help fight against the Ori. After having found another civilization who directed the Ori was wiped out by a plague, the Sodan agree to help the SG-1 capture the prior, who is the one to start the plague on Earth, by using the prior disruptor Dr. Lee and Carter constructed. Once the prior arrives, SG-1 and SG-22 manage to find the right frequency, stunning the prior, who is surprised that his powers are gone and extracting a blood sample that Orlin needs to finish the cure. Meanwhile, Orlin's memories begin to wane because his brain is it's just too big. Back on Earth, Garrett goes to the Stargate Command Infirmary after being convinced by Teal'c to help with the plague. He hesitates to use his powers, but when Teal'c asks him why he hesitates, he admits that he shall die free for helping them. Using his powers, Garrick kills all the infected in the base, but then it instantly explodes. Goodbye, Garrick. You will not be missed. They're able to use the antibodies from this to synthesize a cure and distribute a vaccine, saving the world from the Ori plague. Unfortunately, all this has taken its toll on Orlin, who becomes a normal human being with possible brain damage and no memories of what he has gone through. He is confined to a mental hospital with Sam helping him build a puzzle. How sweet and strange.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this episode, Jeff?
Yeah, I like these two. I had forgotten this is where we get the Ori, how the Ori function, how they require worship in order to have power versus the ancients who gain the power through their own. So I like that that element has been introduced and we finally can understand how the Ori, why the Ori need to do what they do. It starting to kind of give them some context, give them some background and, flesh them out, for lack of a better word. And I like seeing the Sodan, of course. I just feel again that they were kind of wasted here. Like it would have been awesome to have them earlier and been kind of a constant ally. And I like the Jaffa kind of politics, and you even feel bad for Garrick a little bit that he's kind of stuck between, the Jaffa having just gained their freedom and now fighting these super powerful beings that are more powerful than the Gould. And if they don't convert to Origin, they're probably going to die. So I do feel bad for Garrick a little bit there, and he does redeem himself in the end. So I like that. The whole Orlin thing, it's weird, but yeah, I don't know what else to say about it right now. It's a little weird, and they probably went a little too far with some scenes that they didn't need to go really have. But I like that we finally understand ultimately about the Ori, and that it took Orlin or an ancient kind of coming back to reveal that. So I guess he served his purpose there. But yeah, I like these two.
What about you, Lisa?
Yeah, I genuinely like these two. I agree with Jeff that it was at this point where we're finally understanding more about the Ori. The anti-prior weapon device thing was really nice, and that it gives them a way to fight back. But at the same time, I didn't love all of it, but I like that, a couple episodes ago, I was talking about how they just seem too powerful and too like you can't fight against them. And then it's like suddenly we have a way to stop them, which was nice and useful. It just seemed kind of easy, I hate to say.
Yeah.
The Orlin storyline, I don't know. I kind of like it. I almost liked it better than if they'd brought back Orlin as an adult. Because making
they tried.
yeah, they tried. They couldn't get him, right?
Yeah.
The actor. But I kind of liked it as a kid because it took out the whole romance in a weird way, except for the kids like, I understand that this is not favorable, in this your culture or whatever. So it just became kind of a strange relationship, but I liked bringing him back in as a former ancient and his knowledge and then dealing with the Ori and helping them. And so I liked that part of it. Garrick, I've really hated on Garrick. And he redeemed himself here. And I really felt sorry for him. I really just did because, we've talked about the Jaffa being kind of wayward and not knowing what to do next, having freedom from the Gould. And it just, I felt bad that here he was searching end of his life and he's searching for something better and he's searching for, we'll say, higher meaning, higher purpose. And he fell for the Ori. And so he redeemed himself by saving everyone. And I like that. And then the whole quarantine story, it's like we had all these storylines. The whole quarantine plague storyline, I don't know. 5 years is just too soon to be talking about quarantines and plagues and crossing state lines and like shutting down flights. And I'm still not there yet. So I just can't.
Yeah. What about you, Victor?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in these two episodes. As Lisa said, there's a lot of different plot points. We're bopping around between storylines. There's a lot of buildup and it never really pays off anywhere. Just to focus on the plague storyline, it just seems like they're just running from room to room, like naming countries at some point. It's like, now it's in Idaho, now it's in Nevada, now it's in Greece, now it's in France. And you're like, okay, gosh, this could be terrible. And then in the end, they're like, 3,000 people died. You're like, excuse me. The whole timeline of the disease just doesn't map out. It's moving very quickly, but then it kind of stalls out for, the middle part of the two-parter. And then, people don't die for a while, but then it just, I don't know.
It made me think of, have you ever played that? It's a mobile game called Plague Inc.
No, I haven't.
It's this mobile game where basically it was a lot more fun before pre-COVID. Now it's just kind of depressing, but it's like you engineer a biological, like a virus or a bacteria, and you try to strategically spread it throughout the world. And you want to make it so that it's contagious enough to where it spreads easily, but the symptoms aren't bad enough so it doesn't get noticed and they start shutting down and working on a cure. And so basically it's like a strategy game where you try to basically kill the whole world with a virus or a bacteria, and you gotta like manage like your symptoms and the spread of everything, but keep it to where it doesn't get discovered soon enough. And this felt like how it often goes with that game, where you get your disease to spread quickly, but then you use up like your points that you're gaining through infecting people, and you don't make it deadly enough, and then no one ends up dying, and then they cure it.
Yeah, maybe Damaris, the prior, should have spent more time playing that game, and he could have come up with a more effective plague, because this one's just not very effective. And then there's the whole buildup with like, Teal'c trying to force Garrick's hand and force him into a standoff with the Free Jaffa, and that doesn't go anywhere. All these ships appear. You're like, oh boy, we're finally going to get like a ship battle. No, we don't. There's like no action in these two-parters aside from like one little skirmish on the Sudan homeworld where there's no consequences of that, because they're going to be taken to Tony Todd anyways. So there's a lot of buildup. Nothing pays off. It's just, I don't know, a lot of frantic running around, but no real, story payoff that I could see.
There's a lot of walking and talking in this episode. They should have gotten Aaron Sorkin to direct it.
Yeah. Andy Makita does a good job with this two-parter directing, what he's given, but it was Damian Kindler and then Joseph Malazzi co-wrote basically the two-parter together. And the idea was, hey, let's do a plague episode Yeah, but what planet should we set it on? And Robert Cooper said, hey, why don't you set it on Earth? And they're like, really? We can do that? And they're like, sure, why not? But you could tell they didn't want to commit to it and say like, oh no, like, a billion people died. At least in like Star Trek Enterprise, when the Xindi attack Earth, they like take out Florida, basically. There's consequences for the attack and stuff. In this, they just kind of are dipping their toes in the water, but they don't really want to commit.
Yeah, you never feel the stakes of the plague. Like they talk about it and they, like you said, they name places it is, but you don't really see any ill effects of it. And then at the end, they're just like, oh, it's cured. We're done.
Yeah, they even get the like IOC and like, we get Gary Chalkin there as the Russian, we get the French guy and they have a conversation around the table, but that doesn't go anywhere. It just, happens.
Yeah.
There's no consequences of that. Nothing's, anyways.
We do get to see Hammond again, though. I was happy about that.
We do.
Yeah, we almost didn't. It was supposed to be General Jumper, the Air Force chief of the Air Force, whatever they're called. But he wasn't available because there was some, military incursion that they were doing at the time. So,
interesting.
So they got Don S. Davison as Hammond to do those scenes.
Nice.
That was a very bright spot in this episode.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if this was his last appearance, but I was looking and he does come back at least a couple more times. So
good.
I was glad this wasn't his final one. But yeah, the plague storyline, now that you think, I hadn't really thought about it like that. It doesn't really go anywhere, that it's just there's, walking and talking room to room. I wasn't really thinking about that. I was kind of focused more on, like I said, the stuff I talked about earlier, the anti-prior stuff. But yeah, definitely is watching it this now is interesting, having the last 5 years happen. So
well, they set it up as pretty bad, right? It's like, oh no, this and oh no, this, and like everybody's got it, and they're terrible at containment, like terrible,
exactly,
really bad. Like people got on another flight.
Yeah,
I like the part where Orlin knocks the blood over and they start scrambling to clean it up, and then he just walks out of the door.
Yeah.
It's the whole containment protocol at the SGC. It's like it's a super bad plague, but we're going to let everybody go to the Sodan homeworld, and we're going to, let sometimes people have to wear the containment suit, sometimes they don't. It's not real consistent about what their protocol is. At least in something like Foothold, it was much more clear about, what the process was, what the procedure they were following.
Yeah, it would be interesting to, I mean, obviously we can't go back in time and watch this pre-2020, but it would be interesting to see what our opinions would be if we hadn't gone through all that.
I think I think it was a little bit more like suspenseful back then. I remember the end of this two-parter because it was originally aired as a two-parter. And when Garak turns into, or Garak as some of the people call him, there's lots of pronunciations flying around here. I think Braytek refers to him as Garak, when he turns into a prior at the end of part one. I remember being like, whoa, that's really cool. What's going to happen next? And nothing happens really with it.
He floats books around.
Yeah. He's like, behold the power of the Ori. And he makes a couple books levitate off the table. You're like, great.
Yeah.
Well, if you remember, there were months gaps between these two episodes. I think it was September for the first part, and I think the second part didn't air until January. So that's actually a really not like these days where like you have a streaming series come out and then like 3 years later, season 2 comes out. But at least for a mid-season gap, that was a long gap. So that cliffhanger of him turning into an Ori or becoming an Ori, or prior. That was kind of a shocker in the build up for it. And then I didn't remember that it was resolved in the next episode. I thought he was a prior for longer.
Yeah, you can tell this was filmed before the Affordable Care Act because they make a big deal about his prior condition.
Oh.
Sorry.
Nice.
Anyways.
Yeah, there's lots of topical jokes you could make about this, like horribly devastating disease that suddenly goes away.
Yeah,
they don't talk about it anymore. Yeah, and they don't know where it came from.
Yeah, and if this was, I guess, released on streaming services with like a big 3-year gap, eventually, like Orlin would be of legal age again, depending when they went from season to season. And so they had to bring Orlin back because he's the only ascended being who's like remotely cooperated with humans in the past, because Oma's dead, Daniel is not ascended anymore, and John Patrick Flannery was not available. Sean Patrick Flannery, that's it. Was not available, so they're like, well, just bring him back as a kid. And it was Cameron Bright, who does a great job in the role, would show up, and there's a scene around the briefing room table, which is just 5 minutes of him giving exposition, and he just came in that day with it all memorized and prepared to go. So he was they were commenting on the commentary track just what a pro he was, and a joy to work with.
That's cool.
I was gonna say a lot of his delivery felt very, very wooden, but I chalk that up more to the direction than his actual talent as an actor, because it seemed like he did fine. And also Orlin's delivery was very wooden, so it matches with the character.
Yeah, he watched the previous episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I think that was the intention of he was trying to portray someone who is not used to communicating this way, because he even talks about how he can't always distinguish between what he thinks and what he says, because he's not used to that mode of communication.
Yeah, and time. At one point, they're like, "How long is this going to take?" And he's like, "Time is still pretty new to me." Words to that effect. Yeah,
I like that Sam made a couple of toaster jokes. That was nice.
Yeah.
About how he built a Stargate in her basement with her toaster.
And the weird thing about that whole thing is, like, so Orlin's deal is that his mind, he came back as a kid, ostensibly because a young child's mind is better at retention, so he could retain more of the knowledge of the ancients for longer, but he's starting to lose it. And so he has lapses where he, does things twice or says things twice because he's starting to lose his memory in his mind. And early on, Sam's like, is there anything I can do? And he's like, just keep me company. And despite him saying that, and the fact that if Sam was there, she could like prevent him from spending hours writing, a DNA resequencing program, just say, oh, you're starting to do this thing you just finished, do something else. She keeps getting up and walking up out of the room, and not to do anything important. So it's like, Sam, just stay with the kid, keep him on task, and you'll get done a lot quicker. But she's like, oh, well, I'll leave you to it. And then she comes back. It's like, what are you doing? You just did that thing. It's like, well, don't leave him alone, But anyways.
And it's hours and hours between her checking on him, apparently.
Yeah.
And because at one point he even says, I need to do this alone. And
yeah,
like you said, Victor, that would make, like, have someone with him at all times, like have the video recording running so you can refer back to me, like, okay, no, we did this part. What do we need to do next? But
yeah.
I just ended up feeling bad for him.
Yeah. Yeah, he gets to do puzzles, though. That looked pretty fun.
Is he in it looked like a dementia care unit or a nursing home or something? And I'm thinking, so is he in the same place with all the other off-world people that have come to, do they group them together? I don't know.
Are they going to try to like adopt him out now that he has no memories and
yeah,
a kid? This does set up though a potential. We can get Jack's kid from the one and Orlin, because if you age him up, he'd be an adult now. He can be part of the reboot.
Well, and Cassie's an adult by now. She could just adopt him.
That's right.
That's true.
That's right. Yeah.
And then Jack's clone is probably an adult by now. I can't remember how many years ago that was. And you've got a few of them. I'm just saying, like, have a group home.
I kind
of thought that it was that he has like permanent brain damage from all that. So
yeah,
he won't be back because he's probably has, for memory, he might remember from this point forward some things, but he basically will have no, he may not be able to fully function. That's why he's been put in a place like that.
Yeah.
And none of this amazing technology they found throughout the years to restore people's memories. They're not even going to try it.
And he can't get reascended.
Nope.
So.
Yeah. Don't know why. Can't they just stick him in Krylon, or what was the guy's, like, Anubis's Calyx in his machine or something? Is this his ascension machine or something?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know.
That would, but then we get more Orlin.
Yeah, that's true.
Be careful what you ask for.
Hey, at least he got out of being a Carter boyfriend again this time.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
He tried his
Yeah.
best, though.
He did try.
He shot his shot.
Yep. Carter's just not an ancient attracted person there. So
It is I've kind of complained about the way the Jaffa have been handled on this season since they've become the free Jaffa. I feel like they really they haven't taken advantage of that.
Mhm.
And I feel like this kind of brought in a lot of that. And I wish that had been more of the focus rather than the plague, because that was the most interesting part. I think you mentioned that, Jeff, but that was the best part of the episode.
Mhm.
yeah, and this episode does raise a lot of questions too, or answers a lot of questions that we may, like, to what extent do the priors have their own personalities and volition? Like, because I just assumed that they were just like puppets controlled by the
Mhm.
Ori. That's kind of how they come across. You're like, oh, the Ori is just controlling them like puppets. But as it turns out, they retain all their memories from when they were, humans, and they have their own, like, I wouldn't necessarily say free will, but they can exercise their free will and stuff, and so that
Mhm.
kind of recasts the priors, a little bit more. I don't know, not sympathetically, but differently for sure.
But
Yeah.
it opens it up that you could try to win them over. And
Yeah,
I mean, it's a weakness, we'll call it, for the Ori to have their priors be able to be convinced or changed, or loyalty. I did think it was interesting. So we didn't talk about the fact that Garrick he's like, I'm all in for the Ori, but the rest of the Jaffa Council wasn't, and that he got in trouble for not basically killing them.
Mhm.
yeah,
For disagreeing. And he stood up to them and said, I won't do that. I can't do that like that. I'll just keep trying to win them over. And they immediately took him to, I forget the name of the homeworld
Oh,
of
yeah.
the Ori.
Lestis, I think.
Celestis. Yeah,
Celestis. Yeah. So they took him to Celestis, and then he magical poof becomes a prior. And that just seemed interesting to me because he wasn't fully convinced. I mean, he was convinced of the Ori, but not enough to kill for them.
Mhm.
And they made him a prior where, I don't know, one of his primary jobs is to like
yeah,
kill people, create plagues, and, do all that kind of stuff. And so I thought that was, I don't know. I thought it was almost like it happened too fast in this episode. Everything just, it's like that in itself could have been a really interesting, oh my gosh, am I advocating for more Ori? Like that could have been an interesting episode in and of itself. Like the whole
Yeah.
Jaffa Council Ori, Garrick becomes a prior. Oops, now what do we do with him? And it's just like they cram-packed all these things into one.
Yeah, it was interesting with them talking about how the Jaffa now have to worry about, a lot of the council is older, and kind of what does that mean for them? Like, they're kind of starting to worry about this afterlife that they never had to worry about before, or worry about, because in the past we had Braytak talking about, can't remember the name of Oma's planet, but kind of starting on the path of ascension, basically, like the
Eb.
trying to seek the ancestors and whatnot, and yeah, the Jafar are kind of worried about that, and Garrick's like, oh, we have this here. These people they'll ascend us if we serve them, which we find out is a big lie from the Ori, because they don't want to have to share their power, which will be an interesting and then throughout the rest of the season and the rest of the series with some elements of that. But yeah, the Jaffa part was definitely, I think I agree, the best part, and yeah, it could have been interesting if Garrick had been a prior the whole season, and it kind of ended with him turning on the Ori and kind of turning back to the side of the free Jaffa. But yeah, they didn't do that. So
Mhm.
yeah. It's really difficult to know what the rules of being a prior are. Like, if you use your power, do the Ori burn you up? Because it says, like, the Ori aren't really controlling them in this galaxy, or if you just use your power, you just burn up, or it's really unclear. Julian Sands got a credit card in the beginning of the second episode, but I think they just reused his footage from Avalon. I don't think they had him back in and got him into makeup just to say Halidar the Ori, but
It was the same clip.
yeah, it was. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's confusing. And then, we get, it's not an anti-prior gun, but it's kind of an ultrasonic device that Dr. Lee and Carter whip up with Orlin's help, I guess. And the way they use it is kind of weird. The scene where they confront the Prior on the Sodan homeworld was supposed to be shot indoors, but then they decided to do it outdoors on the day because it was a nice day, I guess. So they have this ultrasonic device, and then they put it in a plastic bag and cover it with sand. And I'm wondering if that's going to like decrease the effectiveness of it if it's
That's
like
what I was
underground. Yeah. And then later on, they just kind of have it sitting on like a bench or something. And I'm like, you might just want to be a little bit more careful with that thing. But
And it seems like maybe I missed this, but it works until he overcomes it, or did something happen to the device? Like,
no, he just
I think-
builds up a resistance to it.
okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
Yeah, they can. Right. Yeah, build up tolerance to it to eventually overpower it enough. But by then you can shoot the Prior if you need to. So, or
Yeah.
whatever they do.
But we learn more about this particular Prior who we've seen before, played by William B. Davis, who is the cigarette smoking man from X-Files. And he had a life as Damaris with wife and kids, and then turned his back on them to be a Prior. And he, I guess, remembers them a little bit because Orlin can selectively remember things for being an ancient. And he, because he has all the knowledge of everything, he works hard to remember, the life of this specific Prior, which is pretty convenient, I guess.
But was this Prior from our galaxy or the other galaxy? And I didn't think the Ori and the ancients had much communication through the galaxies. And
Well, the Ori didn't know about the ancients, so I think the Prior was from the other galaxy.
Yeah.
Because the ancients knew about the Ori because they left. They give their backstory in this episode that there was the conflict between science and faith, and the ancients left because of, and I think they even may mention a plague. I can't remember if they did, but they leave their own galaxy to come to the Milky Way galaxy. So, but the Ori, I thought they were all dead. So I would assume there was some big kind of final battle that the ancients escaped and made their way. So.
Yeah, it's not really clear what the limits of the Ori power really are because they're able to turn Garrick into a Prior. He's not really on Celestis. His body is still on Dakara, right? And only his consciousness goes to Celestis, but that's enough to turn him into a Prior back in our galaxy somehow. So
we're just not supposed to think about it too hard.
And get him the big staff.
Yeah, how did they have to ship that? Same day or what? Yeah, I don't know.
And also, it seems like the modus operandus for the Ori to decimate the civilizations that don't bow to them is to give them this plague. But why don't you just? It seems like they have enough power that they could just glass the planet from orbit. Why are you doing it this way?
Well, I think it's because then the Prior can come in and save them or show them mercy, and then that convinces them to then worship. Because they don't just want to kill everybody, they'd rather convert them into devotees. And so if they can use the plague and the healing to convince them of the Ori's power, then they'll worship them. And that's what they want.
Yeah, because the first planet that the team had gone to undercover, they say they went Ori because, I think, of that plague. So they were saying, that's exactly what happened. So, yeah, I think that's exactly right.
And the more the planets are hearing about, they're hearing about it. So the more the planets are hearing about people dying or the plagues or suffering or whatever, and then they're willing, they're not fighting as much against the Ori. So this whole Ori thing still bothers me. Sorry.
But with the plague, Dr. Lamb gets to look very concerned, and with Orlin's brain kind of turning into Swiss cheese, she gets to look very concerned. And eventually, Landry gets the plague eventually, but doesn't get it, as soon as he should have gotten it. And so now he's sick. And they have this reconciliation scene that I think even the director was surprised that Lexa Doig played it very angry. She's reading these lines, and you could tell there's supposed to be an emotion there, where she's choking back emotion and reconciling her feelings, but she still just comes across as very, very angry, and it doesn't suit the scene at all.
Mm-mm. And it's
I like that scene actually.
because she's over the loudspeaker speaking to the whole
Yeah.
room.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and with everyone around her, it didn't feel personal.
No.
I agree with Jeff. I liked it because it felt like she was acknowledging that she understands why it's hard, because she ended up having to go through the same thing, not being able to tell her mom what is going on because it's classified. And so she gets why her dad couldn't tell, like was gone for weeks at a time when she was a kid and wasn't really involved. But she's still upset about that. And she's upset that now she's in the same position that he's in. And so it's like she gets it, but she just is upset with the whole situation.
Yeah, the scene as written is pretty good. It's just, I don't know if Lexa Doig just didn't have the range to pull it off and instead just went into like full anger mode or something. It's just very weird.
We need Dr. Heitmeyer
to come in. Yeah.
to make a visit to this SGC.
Yeah.
Okay, so something else when the guys, I forgot what SG team they were, when they first came back and they're talking about Dr. Lamb and
Sponge baths and
which
the one
felt
guy.
very out of character for Stargate. And then they're like, don't say that, this and that. And then they basically tell everyone that she's Landry's daughter. All of that just felt very strange. And I'm guessing they were just wanting to make sure everyone knew she was Landry's daughter.
Yeah.
And that's why the writers put it in there. But it felt very, very weird. And then to find out that team was the origin of the plague. Like, they're the main contagions. And everyone else who was around anyone else, whether they touched them or not, got it. But Cameron and Daniel did not get it.
Yeah. And Landry didn't get it till later. And
Yeah, that was problematic for me.
And did those two airmen, did they die? Because I know they said several people died, but I don't remember if they mentioned them specifically.
12 people died in the SGC or something at one point, but they don't say who. So probably, I would imagine, like the initial team was the first to die, but they don't say that, Colonel, whatever his face is dead or something. They don't mention that.
I can't remember if he ever comes back because he's been recurring for a while.
Colonel Barnes.
So, Barnes. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a Jaffa as well at various. Nope. He's only in the part 1, so he probably died. Oh, yeah. It says on the wiki he died. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we haven't mentioned a very important Jaffa in this episode, Aaron. I don't know if it's Aaron or Ron, whatever. And it's Christopher Judge's brother.
Oh yeah, he's
Jeff
back.
Judge. Because when he came on the screen, I'm like, why does that guy really look like Christopher Judge? Like a lot.
Yeah.
And I had to look it up, and I was like, that's because it's his brother.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's been in a couple before.
Yeah, he was in the second T'Pol episode, or I think. Yeah.
The Birthright was the first one, and then
yeah.
So I
and
didn't,
out.
Yeah, and Yat Yura is back too. I thought that was who you meant at first. Yat Yura.
Oh,
he's
yeah.
like Garrick's right hand man. Yat Yura is Robert C. Cooper's has to come up with names, and instead of that, it was Yat Yura.
I love that.
Yeah. Like
I was thinking for this episode going to Chulak, it would have been nice for Ryak to show up, like, or for a mention of, like, to say, my son is there, and something. But I know we already, it was last season that it was his last episode, so of course he won't be here. But that would have been nice, and like have some stakes, some personal stakes for Teal'c, not just his home, but his only living blood family left. So
right, and we do get Braytak.
Yep.
And what we talked about many episodes ago of the rightful leader of the Free Jaffa, who it should be, is Braytak. And that's where we end the episode, or in that part of it, right? Is Teal'c telling him to take over.
It's not going to be Kal-El.
Guess it could be her.
Yeah. I love how so Teal'c and Braytak are conspiring, and they're trying to get the any Jaffa that are interested to come over to their side. So they're basically pulling people out of the hallway behind a pillar and saying, hey, you want to join our rebellion here? As other people are walking by, and he's like, I don't know, just talking to you could get me in a lot of trouble. And they're like in a very public open space.
Yeah, I did like that.
Yeah.
It felt like just an old movie. That's what they used to do, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're super secret and no one knows we're here and can hear us in the hallway.
Like,
Wink, wink,
hey,
nudge, nudge.
I saw you talking to Teal'c and Braytek. I don't suppose I need to ask you what that was about, do I? No, Garrick.
Yeah, and I feel like it happens twice this episode where there's like a standoff between Teal'c and Braytek and Garrick walks in and says something and is angry and then leaves and is like, I'm going to kill you guys, but then nothing ends up happening. We get that like the exact same situation twice.
Yeah, so much so that they actually wrote like an extra scene with Garrick and the Prior, back on Dakara, where the Prior basically says like you keep talking to these people and not doing anything.
Yeah. Just a lot of beating around the bush, and
yeah,
you could have just streamlined that whole bit, but I don't know.
One thing I did like about Garrick when he's a Prior, and they mentioned this in the commentary, is that his gold like first prime emblem, they wanted it to look like, because it's like scarred, and then he has gold like markings on his face, and it was like his first prime emblem had kind of melted into his face to make the Prior tattoos and stuff.
Yeah, I thought that was
cool.
a cool effect. He does get the big glowy staff too.
He does, yeah. He only gets to use it once though. Well, I guess he uses it to make the books float. I'm not really sure he got his money's worth out of it.
No.
I just felt like he was more interesting as a Prior.
Yeah, he was a lot more interesting as a Prior. I don't know if they Lou Gossett Jr. scenes, I don't know if they shot this the same time they shot his previous episode, but they were saying that, they didn't specifically mention his health problems here, but they were like, they had to reduce the number of his scenes and, cut around him quite a bit. And I think that might have been the reason for that. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought these are some of the better episodes of season 9, I feel like. Like, it feels like there's more going on. A lot of missed opportunities, but I don't know.
I hate to say it, but I was kind of missing Vala in this episode. Like, at least it would have been like something interesting going on,
I was just going to say at least Vala wasn't in this episode.
Oh, no.
You did have Dr. Lee.
Yeah, Dr. Lee is good. He's listening to his heavy metal there. And,
Yeah.
They're all making fun of Dr. Lee.
Poor Dr. Lee.
Yeah,
he had his whole speech to Sam when she wasn't wasn't listening, had her
earbuds in. Yeah.
How many times have we all done that? Like to people in our house or family or somebody you're talking, usually it's to my kids or something, and they got their little earbuds in. I can't tell.
Noise canceling.
Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, I liked this episode overall, even I think because there was so much going on, lots of missed opportunities, sure. And some of it really could have been of its own episodes. But because there were so many different storylines, I didn't really get bored, because by the time something's happening on one, it switches to the other. And you've got to like, okay, wait, let me remember. And then you got the Sodan, you've got Orlin, you've got all these kind of callbacks to previous episodes and characters, and they just kept you on your toes a little bit. And then they throw General Hammond and Braytek in there, and I don't know, it's like a smorgasbord of guest stars.
It was also nice to see Teal'c have something to do, because I feel like for most of season 9 he's just been there and nothing to do. Like, you could just have cut him out from most of the episodes and it wouldn't really have mattered. But he's like, he has a lot more to do than even Daniel Jackson in this episode. I feel like Daniel kind of had the stand around and make quips role.
Yeah.
And you got to play with the Prior gun remote and try to get that to work.
Yeah.
Which reminds you of, what was that episode name? I can't remember the name. But with the mirror. Remember that very first one with the mirror, and he was flipping and like, is that the reality? Nope. Is that the reality? Yep. It's the same thing. He's flipping this darn remote going, does this work? Does this work?
Yeah. Although, we talking about Teal'c's final like decisive action was to take Garrick to like the memorial plaque, and show him the memorial plaque. of some battle that his father, died in, and Garrick's like, "Oh yeah, that did happen. I remember that now. I'll be good." And so
Also, Garrick didn't. Well, first of all, he's a prior, which I feel like kind of gives him some extra sensory abilities and knowledge. He didn't seem to use that, and also he didn't just say, "Yeah, I've been here before because there's a plaque to my father." Like, I assume he would have visited that spot before.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. He just seemed kind of off his game as a prior. And then when he does like heal everybody, you see the healing wave going through the SGC, and everybody's like, "I feel better now." And so then you're asking yourself, like, does this cover the whole planet? And does everybody get healed? It's like, no, they just take like the antigens from the recovered SGC personnel and make a vaccine out of that. I can't remember if they said vaccine or treatment, because if it's a vaccine, yeah, so all the people who are infected are just going to die, and that's going to be way more than 3,000 people. But whatever.
It would have been better if they'd made it where Garrick's aura had just healed the whole planet all at once.
Yeah.
Because now you're saying that they tracked down every person who'd been exposed or had the virus and gave them a vaccine in the time before they all died.
Yeah, exactly. See, I thought
manufacturing. Yeah, I don't know.
That's some crazy efficiency issues.
Again, post 2020, we know how long it takes to get a vaccine made.
Operation Warp Speed.
Probably would not have thought anything about that pre that time.
And then you think about the commercials they're having to make to get people to come in to get a vaccine, right?
Yeah. Free donuts. Yeah. Yeah.
Lose your job if you don't get vaccinated. Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. At first I thought, but they corrected this pretty quickly in the episode. I thought the whole vaccine thing I thought that his power would actually heal the whole world, and then the vaccine was fake and it was just a cover.
No, they actually say he only healed the people in the SGC, but with Orlin's help, they made the antigen, and then which is great because, like I said, 2 billion people would have died, not at least, would have been like a civilization-ending event.
I think, don't they? I mean, now they're going to have to vaccinate the whole world, so maybe they're have some kind of air dispersal type of thing, like they've done before with other, kind of like the Jaffa poison or something like that.
Yeah,
except it's a vaccine now. But
they could put tanks on airliners and fly them over cities and leave these trails of barium mixed with vaccine and stuff. They could do that. Just hypothetically speaking.
I have a feeling that RFK Jr. wouldn't like these episodes.
No.
Or he'd use them as examples as to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I will. All of this post what we've been through the last half a decade. It is make these episodes a lot more interesting or difficult to to talk about.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do y'all have any other thoughts on these episodes, and do we have any alternate language titles for them?
No on 1, yes on 2. In Italian, we get virus mortale, which is a lethal virus. In German, we get der Apokalypse-Reiter, and then Teil 1 and Teil 2, which is the Horseman of the Apocalypse, parts 1 and 2. And then in Japanese, we get Sambuki Kansen, which is Sinful Contagion.
Oh.
That's a good band name.
Wow.
Yeah. Sinful Contagion, yeah.
Maybe that's what Dr. Lee was listening to.
Yeah.
That was Dark Pariah, so.
That was, yeah.
Which is not a real band. I looked it up.
Oh.
It sounded like Rob Zombie or something.
Yeah, it did. It sounded like Dragula by Rob Zombie, which if you played any video game in the late 90s, it was on every video game soundtrack somehow.
Awesome. Before we go, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secret to Stargate, including Dante V, Carolyn K, Jeremy N, Wendy T, and Paul B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secret to Stargate and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And be sure to follow the show on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or find our video versions at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. To find previous episodes of Secrets of Stargate and to send feedback, please visit sqpn.com/Stargate. And you can email us at stargate@sqpn.com and follow StarQuest on social media, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or on X at SQPN. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode of Atlantis, The Lost Boys. Until then, Jeff Haecker, thank you for joining me in sharing the Secrets of Stargate.
Thanks, Jack.
And Lisa Jones, thank you as well.
Thanks, Jack.
And Victor Lambs, thank you too.
Thanks, Jack. And so then what you do is you dice up the cheese, you toss it in with egg whites, then you chop up some avocado, throw it all together. Whoa, Daddy, you got yourself a wicked omelet.
That sounds delicious. And once again, I'm Jack Baruzzini. Thank you for listening to Secrets of Stargate on StarQuest.
Anyway, I'm sorry, but that just happens to be how I feel about it. What do you think?